Tycoon cast out his pregnant wife Trembling. 3 years later, he saw her with triplets at an event. It began like a fairy tale, or at least that's what Unji had told herself. She stood barefoot on the warm stone tiles of the rooftop, the Seoul skyline glittering like stars just within reach. Her fingers trembled as she held the simple white envelope that contained the news that would change everything. Her eyes sparkled, filled with something between fear and wonder, and she clutched the envelope close to her heart. She turned as the rooftop door creaked open. Minho stepped out, still in his charcoal gray business suit, shoulders stiff from another day of running a company too big for most men's souls. But he smiled when he saw her. The hard lines around his eyes softened. "There you are," he said gently, walking toward her. "You've been up here a while." Unji blinked, unsure how to say it. She glanced down at the envelope again, then back up at the man she had loved so fiercely. "I was waiting for you," she whispered. Minho reached her side, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "What's wrong? You look pale." "I have something to tell you." Her voice cracked. "I'm pregnant." He froze. For a moment, the sounds of the city vanished. The breeze stilled. "What?" "I found out this morning." She opened the envelope and handed him the medical results with trembling fingers. "I was going to wait, but I wanted to tell you face to face." Minho stared at the paper. She watched his face. It didn't twist in joy, nor did it break into relief. Instead, it went blank, like a window closing. Unji felt it instantly, that sudden chill in his presence. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice lower now. She nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Yes, I'm sure. We're going to be parents, Minho." He looked away, jaw tight. "You don't look happy," she whispered. He let out a dry laugh and turned back to her. "It's not about being happy, Unji. This is complicated. You know what I'm dealing with. My board is already on edge. We're in the middle of a major acquisition. A baby? Now." Her smile faded. "So, you're not happy?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," she murmured. Minho rubbed his forehead. "Look, we'll figure it out. Just don't tell anyone yet. Okay? Especially not my mother." Her heart cracked just a little. "Your mother? You know how she is. She still thinks I married you out of rebellion." Unji stepped back. "I thought you married me because you loved me." "I did." The silence that followed was deafening. She swallowed hard. "You used to say we could get through anything together. That even if the world turned its back on us, we'd still have each other. That was before reality came crashing in," he said, softer now. "Before the weight of everything started to crush me." She wrapped her arms around herself. "So what now? Do I carry this baby in silence while you pretend I'm not your wife?" "Don't say that," he muttered, eyes flashing. "You're twisting my words." "I'm not," she said, voice breaking. "You are." The days that followed were quiet but heavy. The mornings were the hardest. Minho would leave early and come home late, offering brief kisses on the forehead, avoiding her growing stomach with his eyes. He started taking more calls behind closed doors. She'd hear his mother's voice echoing through the thin walls of the study, sharp and shrill, saying things like, "This girl will ruin you," and "She's tying you down before your prime." Unji sat alone in the kitchen at night, her tea going cold as she tried to feel hopeful. She remembered how different things had been when they first fell in love. She had been a music student playing piano at a small recital. He had come to the university for a guest lecture on entrepreneurship. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. But that night, something about the sadness in her music pulled him to her, and something about the kindness in his eyes made her believe in him. They had walked by the Han River that same night, hands brushing like shy teenagers. She still remembered the way he whispered, "I don't care about social classes. You make me feel alive." But now, he barely looked at her. Then came the dinner, a formal company affair held at the family estate. Unji didn't want to go, but Minho insisted. "You need to show your face. They need to see that we're still solid." She wore a pale blue dress that stretched slightly over her still small belly. She'd spent hours trying to curl her hair the way he used to like. She wanted him to be proud. She wanted the world to know she wasn't just the poor girl he married. But the moment they entered, Eun-ji felt it. The sneers, the whispers, the glances at her belly. His mother barely acknowledged her. One of Min-ho's old flames, a tall, elegant woman with crimson lipstick, came over and leaned far too close to him. "So this is your wife," the woman said, blinking slowly. Still with her, Min-ho didn't answer. Eun-ji stood by his side, feeling smaller and smaller as the evening dragged on. Then came the final blow. Min-ho's mother stood, raised her glass, and said with a forced smile, "To the future of this company, may nothing or no one stand in the way of its success." Everyone clapped politely. Eun-ji sat frozen, the sting unmistakable. She turned to Min-ho, her eyes pleading, but he wouldn't meet them. After the dinner, in the hallway, she turned to him. "Did you hear what she said?" "She didn't mean it like that," he said dismissively. "She did. And you let her." He finally looked at her. "I've had enough drama tonight, Eun-ji." "So have I," she said through clenched teeth, the tears finally escaping. "I'm carrying your child, and I've never felt more alone." She turned to walk away, but he grabbed her arm. "Don't do this now. Not here." She shook free. "If not now, when?" She walked out into the cold rain, her heels sinking into the grass, her dress ruined, her hair soaked, her stomach cramping. She didn't look back. Min-ho stood under the mansion lights, fists clenched, watching the woman he once promised to protect disappear into the dark night, pregnant and trembling. And he let her go. Você diz. Certo? Agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita moco. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o chat GPT diz. The white ceiling was blinding. It buzzed softly with the flickering of old hospital lights. A faint smell of antiseptic and metal clung to the air. Eun-ji lay there, her fingers curled tightly around the thin hospital blanket, her entire body trembling. Not from the cold, but from the storm inside her chest. She could still feel the rain on her skin, still hear the heavy slam of the mansion's door echoing behind her as she had stumbled into the night. Her legs had given out on the sidewalk. A stranger, an older woman with a plastic umbrella and kind eyes, had seen her collapse and called for help. That's how she got here. That's how she ended up in this sterile, empty room. Alone. The doctor entered quietly. He was gentle, maybe 30, with the type of calm voice that tried too hard not to sound sorry. "Mrs. Kong," he said softly, "you're awake." She nodded, her lips dry. "Yes. You fainted due to exhaustion and stress. And the pregnancy?" He paused, flipping through a clipboard. "We ran a scan. There's something you need to see." Her heart thudded painfully. "Is something wrong with the baby?" The doctor shook his head quickly. "Not wrong, but unexpected." He turned the screen toward her and pressed a few buttons. Eun-ji's breath caught in her throat. 3 tiny hearts, fluttering in perfect rhythm. 3. Her eyes filled with tears. She wasn't just carrying one child. She was carrying 3. The doctor smiled gently. "Congratulations. You're expecting triplets." She stared at the monitor, frozen. Part of her wanted to laugh, of course. The universe didn't do things halfway, did it? Another part of her wanted to cry until her lungs gave out. Min-ho didn't want one baby. What would he say if he knew there were 3? No, that question didn't matter anymore. He wasn't coming. That truth settled over her chest like a boulder. When the doctor left, she curled up on her side, clutching her stomach. She could already feel the tiniest life inside her. 3 little sparks growing in silence. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them, voice shaking. "I'm so sorry you don't have a father. I tried. I really did." She cried until sleep took her again. And when she woke the next morning, something had shifted. The pain was still there, deep and bitter, but underneath it, a spark of something else, a flicker of defiance. She wouldn't let them be born into shame. She wouldn't let them carry the burden of being unwanted. She would protect them, all three of them. The hospital let her stay 2 more days. She had no one to pick her up, no one to call. Her phone lay dead in her coat pocket, and she didn't charge it. She didn't want to see Minho's name. She didn't want to see no messages from him either. On the 3rd day, she left the hospital with a plastic bag carrying her medical papers, a water bottle, and the blue scarf the nurse had given her. She didn't go back to the apartment. She couldn't. It was his. Instead, she took a bus to the train station. She bought a one-way ticket to a quiet coastal town she had once visited with her music students. It wasn't far. It wasn't famous. But it was peaceful. And more than anything, she needed peace. The train rocked gently as it pulled away from the city. She sat near the window, her hand on her belly. Her reflection in the glass looked pale, drawn, but determined. "I don't need him," she said to the wind, to the sky, to herself. "We'll be okay." The town welcomed her with the smell of the sea. The buildings were older, the people slower to speak, but warmer in their smiles. She found a room to rent above a small bakery owned by a widow named Mrs. Go, who didn't ask too many questions and offered her warm soup and extra blankets. In the weeks that followed, Eunji began piecing herself back together. She started teaching music at the local community center. First just piano, then voice. Then she was asked to tutor a group of children preparing for a festival. It wasn't much, but it paid enough to eat and buy vitamins for the babies. She began walking by the beach in the early mornings, one hand always resting on her growing belly. She talked to her babies as if they were already here. "Do you feel that?" she would whisper. "That's the ocean. One day I'll take you swimming. Not too far. Just enough to float." At night, she wrote lullabies in her old notebook. Soft little melodies full of dreams she hadn't stopped dreaming. The months passed. Her belly grew, and with it, her strength. One night, she sat on the rooftop of the bakery. The stars stretched wide above her. She was 8 months along, and every breath felt like carrying the weight of the sky. She placed her hands on her belly and said, "You're not mistakes, you're miracles." And she meant it. The day the triplets were born, the sea roared with a summer storm. She went into labor early, too early, and was rushed to the small-town hospital. The pain was unbearable, her screams swallowed by thunder, but she held on. She fought for them with everything she had. And when it was done, when her eyes fluttered open and the nurse placed 3 tiny, swaddled bundles beside her, she broke, not from sadness, but from overwhelming, soul-consuming love. 3 pairs of tiny hands, 3 miniature faces. One of them already frowned like Minho. Another yawned with a wide-open mouth like her own. The last clutched her finger and wouldn't let go. She named them Hajun, the first to cry, Jie, the only girl, born second, Min-soo, the quiet one, who opened his eyes before any of them. She whispered their names over and over, as if they were a spell to keep her alive. In that moment, Eunji knew this wasn't the life she had dreamed of. Upstairs, above the bakery, her 3 babies slept in a row of small cribs that barely fit in the single room. Hajun mumbled in his sleep. Jie clutched her little stuffed bear with a fierce grip. Min-soo, as always, was silent, his chest rising and falling like a feather caught in the wind. Eunji sat at the edge of her bed, folding baby clothes with the soft rhythm of a woman who had learned to stretch time carefully. She hummed a lullaby under her breath, the same one she had written on a stormy night before they were born. A knock on the door made her pause. Mrs. Go peeked in, holding a small parcel. "Letter for you, dear. No sender. Just your name." Eunji blinked. She hadn't received a letter in months. Most people from her old life didn't know where she was, and those who did, didn't write. "Thank you," she said, gently setting the clothes aside. When the door closed, she held the envelope in her hands for a moment, studying the neat, formal handwriting. A flicker of anxiety stirred in her chest. She opened it carefully and unfolded the single page. It was from Seoul, a lawyer's office, a request. Minho's mother had filed a motion to legally dissolve Eunji's marriage to her son on the grounds of irreparable abandonment. Eunji was to appear in court within 30 days to confirm or contest it. She read the letter again, then again. Her fingers shook. He hadn't even reached out. He was ending everything. Quietly, legally, and coldly. She pressed the letter to her chest, eyes stinging. And then, as if all the strength she had built in the past months had cracked just slightly, she stood up and walked to the window. Outside, children were chasing each other through fallen leaves. She watched them in silence, her hand on the glass. She didn't cry, but inside, something broke again. That night, when the babies were asleep, she took out her old phone and plugged it into the wall. Dust had settled on it like it had been asleep too. She turned it on, heart racing, not knowing what she was hoping to see. No messages, no calls, no missed anything. But there were notifications. Social media, mostly. She tapped through instinctively until she paused on something that caught her breath. A photograph. It had been posted by an acquaintance of Minho's company. Someone from that rich, icy world she had left behind. It showed Minho standing next to a woman in a black dress. His hand was resting gently on her back. The caption read, "Power couple of the year? Rumors say Chairman Kong and heir to the CEO group may finally tie the knot." Eunji stared at the screen for a long time. So that was it. He had moved on, officially, elegantly, and wanted her erased from the picture like she was just a bad investment. She set the phone down, chest tight. The next few days passed like fog. She functioned. She fed the babies, played piano at the center, smiled when she had to. But inside, something hollow echoed with every heartbeat. Then came the whisper. It started at the bakery. Mrs. Go returned from the town market with furrowed brows. "Did you say someone from Seoul was visiting the center?" she asked, placing the groceries on the counter. Eunji blinked. "No. Why?" "I overheard the florist's daughter. She said a man came asking if there was a piano teacher named Eunji here. Tall, dressed in a black suit. Said he was from a music magazine or something." Her stomach twisted. Did she say anything else? Only that he looked out of place. Cold eyes. Expensive watch. Eunji smiled faintly. "Doesn't sound like anyone I know." But her heart wouldn't stop pounding. Later that night, after putting the babies to sleep, she walked down to the small community center and peeked through the windows. No one. Empty. But something in the air had shifted. The next morning, she returned to find an envelope on the piano bench. No name, no note. Just an envelope. Inside were photos of her walking with the babies, of her playing piano, of her shopping at the market. Her hands trembled. Someone was watching her. Someone from that world. She went home and locked the door behind her. Her heart felt like it was on fire. Who was it? Why now? After all this time, why watch her instead of speak to her? She needed answers, but not for her. For the children. Because if someone was coming to take them, if someone thought they could tear apart the fragile piece she had built, she would fight. That night, while the babies slept, Eunji wrote a letter. Not to the lawyer, not to the court, but to Minho. She didn't know if he would read it, but she had to speak. One last time. "Minho, 3 years ago, you looked at me like I was a stranger, and you turned your back while I stood in the rain with your child inside me. Now I learn you're moving on, that you've already written me off, that your family is tying loose ends, like I was one. But let me tell you something you may not know. It wasn't one child. It was 3. 3 lives that came into this world without a name, without a father's touch, but with more love than I ever thought I had in me. They smile. They laugh. They hold my fingers like the world is a good place. And I swore to them that it would be. So if you or anyone else is thinking of coming here to destroy what we've built, don't. You lost the right to call yourself their father the day you let me walk away. And I have no intention of letting you steal even a moment of their peace. Goodbye, Eunji." She stepped inside. The place was quiet as usual. An old radio played a mellow trot song in the background. The clerk smiled at her without looking up. "Just this?" he asked, holding out his hand. She hesitated, fingers clutching the envelope. "Yes," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. As the clerk weighed it, she stared at the mailbox slot, a strange ache crawling up her spine. Once it was sent, there would be no taking it back. The clerk handed her the receipt. "It'll be in Seoul by tomorrow." Eun-ji nodded. "Thank you." She stepped outside and let the cold air hit her. She felt lighter, and at the same time more exposed. Back at home, the triplets were already awake, babbling to each other in their cribs. "Mama!" Jae shouted, her pigtails bouncing as she reached for the bars. Eun-ji scooped her up and kissed her cheek. "You're awake early, princess." Min-soo crawled to the edge of his crib with sleepy eyes and one sock missing, holding up a book like an offering. Ha-jun was already on his feet, bouncing, his grin wide as the sun. It grounded her, anchored her, these three tiny hearts that beat because she refused to give up. Later that week, as she was walking home from the center with the children bundled in their little jackets, she noticed a car parked across the street. A sleek black sedan. Dark windows. No plates from the town. She didn't stop. She didn't look directly, but she felt it, the gaze. Someone was watching again. The next morning, the car was gone. By the end of the week, she started seeing him. He didn't try to hide anymore. A man in a tailored black coat, standing across the street when she picked up groceries. Sitting quietly in the back of the town's only cafe while she helped the children draw pictures for the school festival. He never approached, never spoke, but he was there, and that terrified her more than anything else. One evening, while Mrs. Go watched the triplets upstairs, Eun-ji returned to the cafe, heart pounding. She ordered a tea and turned sharply, locking eyes with the man seated at the corner table. She approached, her voice steady but cold. "If you're going to follow me, the least you can do is explain why." He blinked, caught off guard, then stood slowly. "Miss Kong, I didn't mean to alarm you." "Then stop lurking," she snapped. He took out a card and placed it on the table. "My name is Seo Dae-hyun. I'm an associate of Mr. Kong Min-ho." Her heart stopped at the sound of that name, but her face remained still. "And?" she asked. "He's requested to meet with you, privately, just once. No lawyers, no press, just a conversation." Eun-ji laughed under her breath, bitter and tired. 3 years of silence, and now he wants a conversation? "He only found out recently," the man said. "About the children." Her eyes narrowed. "And whose fault is that?" Dae-hyun remained silent. She turned away. "I have nothing to say to him." "Miss Kong, you tell your boss he had his chance. He threw it away on a rainy night, and I won't give him the satisfaction of pretending that never happened." She walked out without looking back, the bell over the cafe door trembling behind her. But that night, while feeding Jie her bottle, her thoughts wandered. What would she say if she saw him again? Would she scream? Would she cry? Would she say nothing at all? She didn't know. The letter had been a declaration. But seeing him again, that would be war. A few days later, the town's annual festival arrived. It was a small, heartfelt event. The children of the community center were set to perform songs and dances. Eun-ji had helped choreograph their presentation, a medley of lullabies. She was proud of them. She dressed the triplets in matching outfits, white shirts with little red ribbons. Ha-jun kept trying to eat his. Jie twirled like a ballerina. Min-soo stared at his shoes like they were trying to talk to him. The town square was packed with locals and visitors. Parents held up phones to record. Laughter echoed in the air. Eun-ji stood at the side of the stage, ready to step in and help the children with cues. She smiled softly as the piano intro began. Her music, her lullaby. But then, everything slowed. From the corner of her eye, she saw him, standing at the edge of the crowd. Min-ho. He was wearing a navy suit, no tie. His hair was slightly longer than she remembered. His eyes scanned the children until they found hers. And in that moment, neither of them breathed. She felt like her heart had stopped. "Jae, unaware, tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, look, that man looks like Min-soo." Min-ho took a step forward, then stopped. The children began to sing. Their tiny voices, sweet and off-key, filled the air with innocence. The audience smiled, clapped softly. Cameras rolled. The breeze picked up a strand of Eunji's hair, and she didn't move. Min-ho never took his eyes off her, and she stood still, rooted in place, every part of her trembling. Not with fear, but with all the words she never got to say. When the performance ended, the children bowed. Eunji rushed up to help them off the stage, keeping her eyes low, her hands busy. But she knew. She felt it. He was coming closer. Min-ho was walking toward her. Her knees locked in place, yet her fingers trembled as she fixed Ha-jun's crooked collar. Jie tugged at her skirt, asking for a treat, but Eunji couldn't hear anything. Only the sound of her heartbeat, pounding in her ears like a war drum. When she finally looked up, he was there, a few feet away, closer than any nightmare or memory had dared bring him. Min-ho didn't speak at first. He just stared, not at her but at them, the children. His eyes stopped on Min-soo, who stood closest to him. The little boy blinked up with wide, curious eyes, head tilted just slightly, the way he always did when trying to figure out something new. Min-ho's lips parted, but no words came out. He looked as if the wind had been knocked from his chest. They look like you," he finally whispered. Eunji stepped in front of the children before she realized what she was doing. Instinct, shielding, protecting. "They're not yours to look at," she said sharply, her voice a quiet blade. Min-ho's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time in 3 years, she saw them without the coldness, without the indifference, only stunned regret, raw and disoriented. "I didn't know," he said, almost choking. "I swear I didn't know. And what difference would it have made if you had?" She snapped, voice trembling with tightly caged emotion. "You didn't even want one child. You sent me away without looking back. You left me to survive while carrying 3. I was wrong." Eunji let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Wrong? Is that all you have to say after 3 years?" He took a slow step forward. Can we talk? Just you and me." "No," she said firmly, shaking her head. "Not here. Not today. Not while they're watching." Jay peeked around her skirt again and stared at Min-ho. "Mama, who is he?" Eunji looked down, her heart breaking all over again. She crouched and gently brushed Jie's cheek. "Just someone from my past, sweetheart. That's all." Min-ho's face twisted, like the words hit harder than he'd prepared for. The crowd moved on around them. Some people glanced in curiosity, some recognizing Min-ho from television or news articles, others simply sensing the tension in the air. Min-soo reached for Eunji's hand silently, and she gripped it tightly. She could feel his small fingers searching for safety, for answers. "I just want to talk." Min-ho tried again, softer now. "Please, I'm not here to take them. I swear on everything, I need to talk to you." She looked him straight in the eyes then, for the first time since that night. The night she stood in the rain, heartbroken, abandoned, shaking. She let him see the pain he'd carved into her. "You don't get to need anything from me," she said slowly. "You made your choice. You buried me in silence. And now you want a conversation." "I didn't know how to fix what I did," he admitted, eyes glistening. "And when I finally realized what I'd lost, I thought it was too late. But then I saw that photo. I saw them, and it all came crashing down." "A photo?" she repeated coldly. "That's what it took? A picture of children who look like you?" He swallowed. It was like being hit by lightning. "I saw my own face in theirs and God, Eunji, I couldn't breathe." She looked away, blinking fast. She hated that a part of her still reacted to the sound of his voice, that a sliver of her heart still remembered the man who once whispered dreams into her skin. But that man died the night he turned his back. "You don't get to just walk back into this," she whispered. "You don't get to look at them and feel something and think that erases everything." "I know it doesn't," he said, stepping closer. But I had to see you. I had to see them. I haven't slept since I found out. I've been here for days, trying to figure out how to even say hello without making it worse. You should have stayed gone, she said through clenched teeth. It was easier that way. But was it better? He asked. For them? For you, she faltered. And that was when Min-ho gently crouched down, looking not at her, but at Min-soo. Hey, he said softly, voice shaking. Do you like airplanes? Min-soo stared at him silently for a long beat, then nodded once. Me too, Min-ho smiled weakly. When I was little, I wanted to build one. Min-soo blinked and reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded paper plane. He held it out, unsure. Min-ho took it with hands that trembled. Thank you, he whispered, like it meant the world. Eun-ji couldn't breathe. Her heart felt like it was caught in her throat. She was shaking not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of the moment. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to pull her children into her arms and disappear into the wind. But she didn't. Instead, she said quietly, "You have 5 minutes. That's all." Min-ho stood slowly, nodding, eyes never leaving hers. 5 minutes is enough, he said. More than I deserve. She turned to the children. Go with Mrs. Go. I'll come find you in a bit. They obeyed, though Min-soo looked back twice, still clutching the ribbon on his shirt. As they walked away, Eun-ji exhaled, her chest collapsing under years of grief and questions. She faced Min-ho again, her eyes hard. Say what you came to say, because 5 minutes was all he would get. And she wasn't sure if those 5 minutes would reopen the wounds. Eun-ji sat with her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her posture stiff, her shoulders locked in defense. Min-ho sat across from her on the wooden bench, his palms resting on his knees, fingers twitching as if trying to hold together the shreds of whatever courage had brought him here. Neither of them spoke at first. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice low, sharp. For minutes left. He flinched, but nodded. I deserve that. Then stop wasting time. Min-ho looked down at the ground. I want to tell you what happened, not because I expect forgiveness, just so you know the truth. Eun-ji turned her face slightly, avoiding his eyes but listening. Against her will, against her instincts. She had carried his silence for 3 years. She needed to hear the weight of his voice now, needed to feel him stumble on his own guilt. My mother, he began slowly, told me you'd only married me for money, that the pregnancy was a trap, that you'd lied, that you were using me. She let out a laugh, short and bitter. And you believed her. I didn't at first, he said quickly, eyes snapping up. But then, there were rumors, documents, pictures, things that made it look like you were meeting with someone behind my back, that you'd planned the pregnancy. Eun-ji stared at him in disbelief. You thought I staged carrying your child? That I tricked you into it? He closed his eyes, ashamed. I was stupid. I didn't know what to believe. I was being pulled in a dozen directions. My mother, the board, the media, and then there was Sumin. Eun-ji's breath caught. The name was a shard of ice through her stomach. Your ex, she said bitterly. Of course, she always wanted to be part of your family. She never stopped circling. She told me you were going to ruin my future, Min-ho whispered. That marrying you had already caused whispers in the company. She offered to help, said she could repair my image. So you listened to her? Eun-ji spat, trembling now. Instead of the woman you married, the woman who stood in front of you, crying, begging you to believe her. I was a coward, he said, voice breaking. I didn't want to confront the truth. It was easier to believe you betrayed me than to admit I was losing control of my life. Eun-ji stood suddenly, her eyes burning. You didn't just lose control, Min-ho. You threw me away like I was nothing. Like I meant nothing. I know, he said, standing too desperate. I know what I did. I let fear and pride make the decision for me. And the moment you walked out into that rain, I knew I had done something I could never undo. She shook her head. But you didn't come after me. I did, he said quickly. That night, I tried. I went to the hospital, but they said you'd been discharged. I went to the apartment. You were gone. Your phone was off. Your friends wouldn't speak to me. Because I didn't want to be found, she snapped. I was pregnant and alone. I didn't want to see your face. Not after what you did. His voice dropped. I searched for you for a while, but then things got worse. The company was falling apart. My mother threatened to cut me out entirely, and I convinced myself you were better off without me. She stared at him, stunned. You convinced yourself I was better off, raising 3 children alone? Without money, without help, without you? He hesitated. I didn't know there were 3. And if there had been only 1? She asked, her voice a raw whisper. Would you still have left me behind? Minho swallowed hard. I don't know. I was a different man back then. She crossed her arms. People don't change that fast. I did, he said firmly. The day I saw that photo of them in the park. It wrecked me. Every dream I had. Every plan I thought I wanted. It all felt meaningless. She stared at him, lips trembling. He stepped closer, cautiously. I saw my own eyes on a little boy I've never held. I saw my jawline on a daughter who doesn't even know my name. I missed everything. You don't deserve to know them, she whispered, the tears rising now, despite her will. You missed their first laugh, their first step, their first fever. I sat up every night praying they would just breathe through the night because I had no one to help me. Minho's eyes filled. I don't want to erase the pain. I can't. But I want to be present now. Even if it's just as a stranger who pays child support. Even if you never let me near them again. I want to do right by them. She looked away, blinking rapidly, her throat too tight to speak. He reached into his coat pocket and held something out. A folded sheet of paper. Worn. Familiar. Her lullaby. I found this online, he said quietly. Someone filmed the children singing at the center. You were behind the camera, coaching them. And I heard this melody. I've been listening to it every night since. I memorized the lyrics. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Unji took the paper from his hands slowly. She didn't remember being filmed that day. Minho's voice broke. I lost everything when I lost you, but the thing I regret most is never hearing that song from your lips while you held our children. Her hands trembled. For the first time since his arrival, she saw the cracks in his armor. Not just regret, but shame and grief. Deep, bitter grief. And still, her heart didn't let go. Not yet. You have no idea what you've done to us, she said softly, tears rolling down her cheeks. And I don't know if I can forgive you, but for them, for the children. She looked up at him, eyes full of sorrow. I won't keep them from knowing who you are. Minho's breath caught. But don't expect them to love you overnight, she added, her voice like glass. And don't expect me to ever go back to being the woman who once waited for you to come home. He nodded slowly, a tear escaping down his cheek. I won't ask for that. She stepped away, glancing over her shoulder at the children now playing near the stage. Come tomorrow, she said. No gifts, no promises, just meet them. Then she turned and walked toward her children, her hands wiping her tears before they could see. And behind her, Minho stood alone in the fading light, holding the paper airplane Minsu had given him. Hope folded in silence, suspended between what was lost. Hajun was licking honey off his spoon, giggling when it stuck to his nose. Jie braided her doll's hair with precise, concentrated focus. Minsu stared out the window, his quiet eyes following the clouds like they carried secrets. She hadn't told them he was coming. How could she? How do you explain the sudden reappearance of a father they never knew they had? A man whose name she had never once said out loud in front of them. She turned as a soft knock echoed from the front door downstairs. Mrs. Go poked her head into the kitchen a moment later, eyes warm but cautious. He's here. Unji didn't move. Her stomach twisted. Her legs didn't feel like they belonged to her. Do you want me to send him away? Mrs. Go asked gently. Unji shook her head. No, let him come up. The triplets glanced at her, curious. Hajun tilted his head. Is it Uncle Jungmin again? No, she said quietly, clearing her throat. Someone else. Heavy footsteps approached the staircase. A pause. Then 3 slow knocks on the upstairs door. She opened it. Minho stood there holding a transparent umbrella and a paper bag in his hand. He wore no suit today, just a navy sweater and black slacks. He looked almost ordinary, human. I brought tangerines, he said awkwardly, lifting the bag. I remember you loved them. Unji stepped aside. They're not for me. He walked in slowly, his eyes instantly finding the children. They stared back at him, wide-eyed, silent. Minho froze, the bag still in his hand, like he was trying to memorize every detail of their faces. Jie was the first to break the silence. It's the airplane man. Minsu didn't say a word, just stood there, pressing closer to Unji. Hajun, always the bold one, pointed. Who are you? Minho crouched slowly so he was at eye level. My name is Minho. Are you Mama's friend? Jie asked, squinting. You look sad. He smiled faintly. I guess I am sad. Why? Minsu asked finally, voice small but clear. Minho took a slow breath. Because I've missed a lot of time I should have had with you, and I'm hoping maybe, if your mom lets me, I can be part of your life now. Hajun wrinkled his nose. Are you going to live with us? Unji answered for him. No, he's just visiting. Minho glanced at her, thankful. Maybe, that she had stepped in before he said something wrong. I brought these, he said, opening the bag and offering the tangerines. They're really sweet. You can each have one. The triplets stared at the fruit for a moment. Then Jie reached for one cautiously. She peeled it and took a bite. Her face lit up. It is sweet. Hajun immediately followed. Minsu didn't, but sat down quietly, watching. Minho sat on the floor too, legs crossed, his hands resting carefully on his knees like he was afraid to move too fast. I didn't know how to do this, he said softly, looking at them. I still don't, but I want to try, if you'll let me. Try what? Hajun asked, mouth full of fruit. Minho smiled. Try to get to know you. Learn what you like, what you dream about, who you are. Jie twirled a strand of her hair. I want to be a dancer, and a vet, and a princess. Noted, Minho said with a small laugh. What about you? He asked Hajun. I want to be a superhero, but only the kind that flies. Minho turned to Minsu. And you? Minsu looked at his mother first, as if asking permission. Unji gave a small nod. I like building things, Minsu said, and making airplanes. Minho swallowed hard. His voice caught when he said, I used to say the same thing when I was your age. A long silence followed. Not tense, just heavy. The triplets returned to their toys soon after, leaving Minho and Unji standing by the kitchen. They're amazing, he whispered. Smart, bright, brave. They've had to be. He looked at her with soft regret. Thank you for raising them. She didn't reply. Her eyes were guarded, though softer than before. I thought I could just show up and fix things, he said. But now I see it doesn't work that way. They're not a second chance to make myself feel better. They're not a cure for guilt. No, she said quietly, watching the children. They're their own people. They're not here to heal you. They're not here to make you feel whole. Minho nodded slowly. I want to be someone they can count on, even if they don't call me Dad. You'll have to earn that, she said. I know. More silence. Then she said, You didn't ask about me. He turned. I didn't know if I had the right. You don't, she admitted. But I'll tell you anyway. I was angry, broken. For a long time, I hated the sound of your name. I hated how your voice echoed in my memories. But I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. They needed me. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. I survived, she said simply. Because I had to. He looked at her again, his voice almost a whisper. Do you hate me now? She looked at him for a long time. No, she said, eyes shining. But I don't love you either. And that was the truth. Not cruel, not cold, just honest. Minho smiled through the pain. That's fair. He turned back toward the children. Jie waved at him. Can you come again tomorrow? His heart clenched. He looked at Eunji. She hesitated, then nodded once. Tomorrow. Same time. He nodded back. I'll bring more tangerines. As he left, umbrella open against the drizzle that had begun to fall. Eunji watched from the window. For the first time in 3 years, the storm outside felt lighter than the one in her heart. But inside, another storm was quietly beginning. Because as the door closed and the scent of tangerines lingered behind him, she knew Minho's presence wasn't the end of the story. Minho came again the next day, and the day after that, always at the same hour, always with something simple in hand, a small toy airplane, a picture book, an orange balloon. Never flashy, never loud, just present. He sat with the children, listened to their stories, asked about their drawings. He helped Jie tie her shoelaces, laughed softly when Hajun jumped from the stairs pretending to fly, and watched with reverent attention as Minsu tried to fix a broken wind-up car. Eunji didn't interfere. She stayed at the edge, folding laundry or tidying the table, her eyes always half on them, half on him. Minho didn't push. He didn't ask for more time. He never once said the word dad, but it hung in the air, unsaid, just waiting for someone, one of them, to give it permission to exist. And then, one afternoon, everything changed. Eunji was walking back from the market, a bag of vegetables in her arms, when she heard a voice from behind. Eunji. Her body froze. She knew that voice. It had lived in her nightmares long after the pain faded. Sharp, condescending, cold as winter wind. She turned slowly, and there she was, Madame Kong, Minho's mother, elegant as ever in a beige trench coat, a pearl brooch at her collar, lips painted in a shade too red for someone so calculated. It's really you, the woman said, almost surprised. I almost didn't believe it. Eunji clutched the bag tighter. What are you doing here? I came to see for myself, Madame Kong said, stepping forward, eyes scanning the quaint bakery, the small alley street, the modest coat Eunji wore. Minho told me you were here, but I didn't believe he'd actually found you. I had to see how far you'd really fallen. Eunji's jaw clenched. I haven't fallen. I've rebuilt. The older woman smiled thinly. With 3 illegitimate children? They're legitimate, she snapped. They're his. And you know it. Madame Kang's eyes narrowed. They may share his blood, but don't assume that entitles you to anything. My son has a future, a company, a reputation. This, she gestured to the bakery, is not part of it. You mean you decided that? I protected him, Madame Kang said. From ruin, from scandal, from you. I loved him, Eunji hissed. And he loved me. But you couldn't stand seeing your son choose someone outside your perfect, shallow world. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. Not this time. The older woman stepped even closer, her tone darkening. Let me be clear, Eunji. Whatever fantasy you're building here, this reunion, it ends now. My son may be lost in guilt, but I am not. I will not let you or your children drag him down. Eunji stared at her, stunned, then slowly set the grocery bag down on the ground. Say what you came to say, she said, her voice low. Madame Kang raised her chin. You will leave this place, quietly. I've prepared a home for you in the countryside. You'll be cared for discreetly. In exchange, you will give up any attempt to claim Minho as the children's father. You will disappear, permanently. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Eunji laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't joyful, but it echoed through the narrow street like a warning. You still think I want your money, she said. You still think I want a place at your table. Madame Kang's face didn't move. I never wanted your world, Eunji continued, stepping forward now, anger rising in her chest like fire. I wanted your son's love. I wanted a family, but you destroyed that. And now, when he's trying to be human again, you show up to finish what you started. You're emotional, Madame Kang said coolly. You always were. Unji's eyes flashed. You're right. I am emotional, because I gave birth to 3 children alone. Because I held them while they cried, while they bled, while they burned with fever and begged for a father I couldn't name. So don't talk to me about what's best for Minho. You don't even know what love is. You will regret this, Madame Kong said, her voice a hiss. No, Unji replied, trembling. The only thing I regret is not standing up to you sooner. A shadow moved behind them. Minho. He had been walking toward the bakery with a small bag of candies in hand, but now he stood frozen just a few feet away, watching, listening. Madame Kong turned. His expression was unreadable. Minho, she said, forcing a soft smile. I was just... Don't, he interrupted. The silence that followed was deafening. He stepped between them, his back to his mother, facing Unji. Are you okay? He asked, voice quiet but firm. Unji nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. Then he turned around. You came here to threaten the mother of my children? He asked, voice low, trembling with something that sounded a lot like rage. I came to protect you, Madame Kong said. She's manipulating you. She didn't ask me to come, he said. She didn't call me. She didn't beg. You lied to me for years. You pushed her out. Not her. You. She would have ruined you. You ruined me, he whispered, because I let you, and I will never forgive myself for that. Madame Kang's eyes flashed. Minho, this is the last time we speak, he said. Unless it's about my children. You're not welcome in their lives. Or hers. Unji gasped softly. She hadn't expected him to say it. Not like that. Not in front of her. Madame Kang's lips trembled, then stiffened into a tight line. She turned on her heel and left without another word. Minho stood there, still staring at the space where his mother had been. Then he turned to Unji. I should have said that a long time ago, he said. I'm sorry. Unji felt the tears sting her eyes again. Not from pain, but from the way the past was finally breaking apart. She reached down and picked up the bag of vegetables. I'll be inside, she whispered. Unji sat on the floor beside the low coffee table, folding the laundry in slow, tired movements. Across from her, Minho sat quietly, his coat draped over the back of the chair, hands clasped together as though he were holding something fragile between his palms. She hadn't spoken much since they returned from the street. She hadn't said a word about his mother, about what had happened between them, but he knew the silence wasn't forgiveness. It was just the space between one battle and the next. She folded a small shirt, one of Minsu's, and finally looked up. You didn't have to do that. I did, Minho said softly, and I should have done it years ago. Unji met his eyes, her voice low. You really cut her off? He nodded. I've tried to justify her actions for most of my life, but today I saw her for what she truly is. He paused, then added, a threat to what matters. She studied him for a moment, as if trying to gauge how much of that was real and how much was just guilt dressed in sincerity. They'll ask, she said after a while, voice quieter now. The kids, one day, about why you weren't there. I know. What will you tell them? Minho breathed in, then out. The truth, that I was scared, that I made the worst mistake of my life, and that you were the one who protected them when I didn't. Unji swallowed hard. A knot formed in her throat, but she pushed through it. They deserve more than apologies, Minho. They deserve stability, trust. They've never had to wonder if someone would come home at night. You can't walk in and confuse that. I won't disrupt them, he said. I promise. I'll follow your pace. Their pace. She nodded slowly, the knot loosening just slightly. But then, almost reluctantly, she said, there's something else. He looked up, brows furrowed gently. Unji set aside the folded laundry and reached into the drawer of the cabinet behind her. She pulled out an envelope, old, soft around the corners, worn from time and hesitation. This arrived last week, she said. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure what to do. He took it carefully and opened it. His face tightened as he scanned the contents. A letter from a journalist. I recognized your children in a video that recently circulated online. Minho read aloud slowly, voice tightening. If you are willing to give your side of the story, I believe the public deserves to know what really happened. His hands shook slightly. They found us, Unji whispered. The press. It was bound to happen eventually. And once they start asking questions, it won't stop. Minho's jaw clenched. I'll shut it down. You can't, she said. Not entirely. Not forever. He set the letter down and leaned forward. Then let's get ahead of it. Let's take control of the story. Not to win sympathy, but to protect the kids. Unji's eyes filled with unease. You mean tell the truth? If we don't, others will tell it for us. And they won't be kind. She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. The idea of their story, her story, becoming public felt like someone opening a door she had spent years locking and relocking. I don't want them growing up with headlines about being abandoned, she said. They won't, Minho said. Not if we're the ones writing the narrative. She looked at him sharply. Do you really think your world, the board, your investors will accept this? You think they'll smile and say, good job, chairman, for having a secret family with a woman you threw away? His face hardened. If they don't, then they're not the kind of people I want around me anymore. She blinked. That sounded like something the old Minho would never have said. You'd risk your company for this? She asked, voice tight with disbelief. I'm not risking it, he said more calmly now. I'm realigning it around the people I love. Unji's breath caught. That word, love. It rang through the room like a church bell, shaking something inside her chest she had tried so hard to silence. But she didn't answer it. Not yet. Instead, she stood and walked toward the small shelf near the wall, where a stack of colored papers and children's drawings were kept. She picked up a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures with bright, scribbled hair, and a tall figure beside them with no face. This was Minsu's drawing from yesterday, she said. He told me it was us and the man who brings tangerines. Minho reached out and took the picture gently. He stared at the faceless figure beside the children. His throat tightened. He said he didn't know what face to draw yet, she added, watching him closely. Minho nodded slowly, voice rough. Then I'll earn it, one day at a time. Outside, the rain began to fall harder. Inside, Unji sat back down beside him. Not close, but not distant either. You'll need to be strong, she said. Not just for the kids. For yourself. For everything that's coming. I will be, he promised. She turned to the laundry again, but her hands were slower now. The storm wasn't gone. But for the first time, they were bracing for it together. Weeks had passed since that quiet, rain-soaked evening where Minho promised to earn his place. And in that time, his visits had continued, not every day, but enough for the children to begin expecting him. Enough for them to begin asking when the Tangerine Man would come again. Minsu, shy as always, was the last to open up. But even he had started sitting beside Minho during their weekend craft sessions, quietly handing him pieces of paper without looking up. And then one morning, everything shifted. It was early spring. The town's annual charity gala was being organized by the local council. Not a glamorous affair, no gowns, no press, but meaningful to the community. A fundraiser for the children's education program at the community center, where Unji volunteered. She was surprised when they asked her to play piano during the event. Even more surprised when she saw her name printed on the flyers as special performance. Unji Kong and the Little Voices. They've heard your lullabies, the head of the center had told her with a smile. The children adore them. You've brought this town more beauty than you know. Unji had hesitated, heart fluttering at the thought of being seen, being heard, really seen, for the first time in years. When she told the children, they cheered. Jay declared she would wear her sparkle shoes. Hajun said he'd clap louder than anyone. Minsu quietly folded a paper crown and placed it on her head. She didn't tell Minho at first, but he found out anyway. He showed up the night before the gala with a small black box in his hand. For you, he said. Unji raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. I told you not to bring me anything. It's not expensive, he said quickly, lifting the lid. Inside was a simple silver hairpin with tiny music notes engraved along its curve. It reminded me of your first recital, he added softly. I still remember the way your hair kept falling in your eyes, and you just kept playing. She stared at the pin. Something inside her stirred, something warm and dangerous. She took it gently but said nothing. I heard you'll be playing tomorrow, he said. If you're okay with it, I'd like to be there. She hesitated. There'll be a lot of people. It's not a place for... I don't care about them, he interrupted. I care about being there for you. For them. Just as support. Quiet. In the back. She finally nodded. Just once. And so the next evening arrived. The town hall was filled with people. Tables. Decorated with handmade crafts. Children's drawings framed along the walls. Laughter. Light. The warmth of a community that still believed in small miracles. Unji stood behind the curtain backstage, dressed in a pale blue dress. Jie had picked it. She hadn't worn something this elegant since before the babies were born. Her fingers trembled. She hadn't played for an audience in years. From behind the curtain, she could hear the MC announcing her name. She turned slightly and saw Minho standing just off stage, near the back of the hall. He wasn't in the spotlight. He didn't wave. He just stood there, watching her like she was the most important part of the room. She stepped onto the stage. The lights weren't too bright. The crowd wasn't too large. But her heart pounded as if it were an arena. She sat at the piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and breathed. The first notes rang out. Soft, steady, a lullaby. The one she had written when she was alone in that hospital room. Knowing she had 3 lives inside her, but no one at her side. Now, the notes danced differently. They weren't sad anymore. They carried hope, memory, healing. She played as if telling a story with no words. A story of survival, of strength, of motherhood, of scars that had learned how to shimmer in the light. When the last note faded, the room was still for a beat too long. Then applause erupted. But her eyes didn't look at the clapping hands. They searched the back of the room and found his. Minho wasn't clapping. He was still, eyes glistening, hands trembling slightly at his sides. And then he mouthed the words, "Thank you." She smiled. Not wide, not certain, but real. Later, after the children's choir had finished, after the guests began to mingle and eat, Unji stepped outside into the cool evening air. The scent of spring blossoms and city lights filled the night. Minho followed. You were incredible, he said quietly. I forgot how it felt to hear you play like that. She looked at the stars above. I forgot how it felt to be myself. You were always yourself, he replied. Even when I didn't see it. There was a long silence between them. And then he said gently, You looked happy. I was, she whispered. In that moment, I was. He nodded. Do you think there could be more moments like that? She turned to him slowly, searching his face for the boy she once loved and the man he had become. I don't know, she said honestly, but I'm not afraid to find out anymore. And with that, she turned back toward the light and sound of the hall. Minho didn't follow right away. He stayed there a while, alone in the quiet, breathing in the sound of music still echoing from the room, letting her words settle deep into his soul like the first seed of something he dared to hope could grow again. Unji stood by the sink, rinsing a glass, her thoughts still lingering on the gala, on the way the keys had felt beneath her fingers, on the stillness that had settled inside her for the first time in years. She didn't hear him at first. Can I come in? She turned. Minho stood at the open door, hesitant, holding a small container of soup. She blinked. You cooked. He stepped inside sheepishly. I tried. There's a high chance it's awful. But I wanted to try something ordinary today. The children ran up to him, shouting Tangaman, their new nickname for him, and pulled at his hands. Did you see Mama in the shiny dress last night? Jie asked. She looked like a star. Hajun chimed. Minsu, quiet as usual, just handed Minho a paper heart folded neatly in four. I did see her, Minho said softly. She was beautiful. Eunji rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed. Don't teach them to flatter their way out of things. He laughed. Too late. They ate together, all of them, cross-legged on the floor. The soup was surprisingly decent. Hajun made a mess. Jie insisted on feeding Minho a spoonful while scolding him for not seasoning it enough. Minsu remained observant, occasionally offering silent approval with a nod. And then, as the children began to doze off one by one in the warmth of the late morning sun, a heavier quiet began to settle. Eunji stood, gathering the bowls. Minho followed her to the kitchen. "Let me help," he said. She handed him a cloth. "Then dry." They stood side by side, the rhythm of water and towels between them almost like a song. "I meant what I said yesterday," Minho said finally, "about wanting more moments." Eunji didn't look at him. "That's not how healing works. It's not linear. It doesn't happen because we want it." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to forget, or to pretend none of it happened." "Then what are you asking for?" she asked, turning now, her voice suddenly sharper. "Because you keep saying the right things. You show up, you listen, you're patient. And Her voice broke. "I don't know if I can handle it if it's all temporary. If one day you change your mind again." His face fell. "I won't. Not this time. You say that now. But you said you loved me once. And when things got hard, when people whispered and judged, you chose them." "I chose wrong," he said firmly. "And I live with that every day." She stared at him, hands trembling slightly at her sides. "I can't afford to hope, Minho. Not when there are 3 little hearts who will notice if mine breaks again." "I know," he whispered, "which is why I'm not asking you to believe in me yet. I'm asking you to let me keep showing you who I am now, even if it takes months, years." She looked at him, searching his eyes. They weren't pleading. They weren't desperate. They were steady, and that frightened her more than anything, because she wanted to believe him. She wanted to hope, and she hated that part of herself. "I wrote you letters," she said suddenly, breath caught in her throat. Minho blinked. "What?" "After I gave birth. Late at night. I would write you letters I never sent. Sometimes I cursed you. Sometimes I begged you to find me. Sometimes I told you about the way Minsu held my finger while he slept." Her voice cracked. "They're in a drawer somewhere. All of them. Dozens of pages. They're stained with tears and baby formula and fury." Minho didn't speak. And then she whispered, "I used to write them so that I wouldn't hate you." He stepped closer, slow, careful. "Can I read them?" "I don't know," she said. "Part of me wants to burn them. Part of me wants to hand them to you and say, 'Here, feel everything I felt.'" "I want to," he said. "I want to feel it. All of it. So I never forget what it cost you." The silence between them became something sacred. Not heavy, not sharp, just honest. And then Minsu's small voice echoed from the hallway, soft and sleepy. "Mama? Who's going to take me to the library tomorrow?" Eunji turned. Before she could speak, Minho replied gently, "If it's okay, I'd like to." There was a pause. Then Minsu nodded. "Okay." Eunji looked down at the dishes, suddenly blinking back tears. Minho reached out, brushing her hand lightly. "I'm not here to undo the past," he said. "I'm here to earn the future, one step at a time." She didn't answer. The kids noticed immediately. "Where's Tangaman?" Jay asked, standing by the window with her doll pressed to her chest. "Maybe he's making a bigger airplane," Hajun suggested, still hopeful. Minsu, silent as usual, said nothing, but folded a napkin into a crooked wing and placed it on the table, as if trying to summon him. Eunji waited until they were asleep before dialing his number. It rang. Once, twice. Voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. Her chest tightened. Not panic. Not yet. But something colder, familiar. Disappointment. It wasn't just about him missing the library trip with Minsu. It was the silence. the absence that echoed louder than any goodbye. By the next morning, her worry shifted into something sharper. She stood at the sink, clutching the edge of the counter, staring down at the empty cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Then a knock came at the door. She opened it fast, her heart leaping, only to find Dae-hyun, Min-ho's assistant, standing there with rain on his shoulders and a look in his eyes she didn't like. "He asked me not to come," Dae-hyun said. "But I thought you deserved to know." "Know what?" she asked, her voice already turning brittle. "There was a board meeting yesterday. Unplanned. Emergency session. The old guard, your mother-in-law included, they moved to strip him of his position." Eunji's breath caught. "What? Why?" "They found out about the children. About the gala appearance. The press hasn't broken it yet, but the board panicked. They called it a scandal. Said he was compromising the company's image." She felt her legs weaken. "Is he okay?" she asked quietly. "He's fighting it," Dae-hyun said. "But they're threatening lawsuits, severance clauses. He's basically locked out of his own office. And he didn't tell me," she whispered, more to herself than him. "He didn't want you to worry. He said he didn't want this to touch you or the kids." She looked past him, her throat tightening. "Where is he now?" "He's staying in the city. Not at the penthouse, he left it behind. Someplace near the river. Quiet." He handed her a slip of paper. An address. She took it without a word and closed the door gently behind her. That night, she asked Mrs. Go to stay with the children. And she went. The apartment was small. A 2-room flat with no view, no shine. Nothing like the life he once lived. She knocked. Once. Then again. Min-ho opened the door wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and tired eyes. He froze when he saw her. "Eunji," he said, stunned. "You should have told me," she said. He stepped aside wordlessly, and she walked in. The place smelled like takeout and unopened books. A pile of business files sat untouched on the table. She turned to face him. "You said you wanted to be present, that you were done running." "I wasn't running," he said softly. "I was trying to shield you." "From what?" she snapped. "From your shame." "No, from becoming the reason I lost everything. From having you and the kids dragged into a media circus." She stepped forward. "But you already lost everything, Min-ho. And I didn't even know. I didn't want you to feel responsible." She stared at him, eyes shining with something fiercer than anger. "You don't get to choose what I feel. Not anymore. You wanted to build something real? Real means showing up when it's hard. Not just when you're holding a paper plane or tangerines." He sat down slowly, as if the weight of her words pushed him into the chair. "I'm scared," he said. That made her pause. He looked up at her, voice quiet. "I thought standing up to my mother would be the hardest part. But it wasn't. It was losing everything I worked for. The company, my identity, all I've ever been." She sat across from him, not touching, but closer now. "That's not all you are. It never was. But you were too proud to see it." His voice cracked. "And if I can't give you and the kids stability now, what am I? You're a man who broke and is trying to rebuild," she said gently. "But not alone." Min-ho stared at her, his eyes filling. "You still trust me?" "No," she said. "Not fully." He nodded slowly. "But I'm starting to believe in you again." He exhaled sharply, like he hadn't let himself breathe in days. She reached across the table, laid her hand on his. "You're not doing this alone, Min-ho. Not this time." He gripped her hand like it was the only real thing left in the world. And in that quiet, run-down apartment, something finally broke open between them. Not like glass shattering, but like ice melting. Slow, painful, hopeful. Disgraced heir secretly fathers triplets with exiled wife. From boardroom to baby bottles, the fall of Kang Min-ho. Scandal unfolds. Former chairman's hidden family revealed. The photos weren't grainy. They were clear. Too clear. One showed Eunji walking through the town square, holding JS' hand. Another zoomed in on Min-soo sitting in his lap, drawing silently. But the worst, by far, was the one of Eunji at the charity gala. Her face turned slightly as she played the piano. She looked luminous and exposed. He grabbed his coat, keys shaking in his hand. His phone buzzed again. Unknown numbers, reporters, colleagues he no longer trusted. He didn't answer a single one. The bakery door was locked when he arrived. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Then the curtain moved. Eunji opened the door halfway, eyes red, her expression unreadable. "You saw it?" she asked. He nodded. "I didn't think they'd—" "You didn't think?" She cut in, her voice low and trembling. "That's the problem." He stepped inside, the air inside thick and tense. The children were in the back room, but their muffled voices had gone quiet, too quiet. "Who took those pictures?" she asked. "Who sold them?" "I don't know," he said. "I swear, it wasn't me, and I would never have—" "I know it wasn't you," she snapped, pacing now. "But someone close to you. You're bored? Your mother? You told me this would happen, Minho. You warned me, but you came anyway. You smiled in town, you stood at that gala, and now this is what we get. I'll fix it." Her laugh was hollow. "You can't fix this with tangerines." He closed his eyes, breathing hard. "Let me protect you. Let me do something." "Protect me?" she said, stepping closer now, her voice breaking. "Where was that protection when they shoved microphones in my face this morning? When my daughter asked why strangers were saying I was a secret?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I know you are," she said, her eyes burning. "But your sorrow doesn't shield my children. Doesn't undo the fear in Minsu's eyes when he heard the word bastard on someone's phone." Minho staggered back like she'd slapped him. Eunji pressed her hands to her face, breathing hard. Then, after a long moment, she lowered them and looked at him. "You want to help?" she said. "Yes," he said instantly. "Then listen. We need to leave." He blinked. "What?" "Not forever," she clarified. "But for now, somewhere quiet. Somewhere without cameras and microphones and vultures. Somewhere the kids can sleep without people pointing at them through windows." He hesitated. "You're asking me to disappear again. I'm asking you to think long-term, to make space so we can breathe. What they've done is going to follow us for a while. But if we give it space to burn out, we might come out with something worth saving." He nodded slowly, reluctantly. "Where would you go?" "There's a friend," she said. "A teacher I studied music with years ago. She runs a boarding school by the coast. She offered us a small cottage nearby. It's old, but private." He ran a hand through his hair. "You'd go alone?" "No," she said. "I want you to come." His head jerked up. "But not as their father," she continued. "Not yet. Not unless they ask for it. You come as you've been coming, as the man who shows up. Quiet, respectful, patient." He let out a shaky breath. "I'll come. And we don't speak to the press," she added. "We don't feed the fire." "I agree. If anyone follows us, if anyone leaks where we are, you walk away. You cut ties with whoever did it. No questions." "Done," he said. They stood in silence for a moment, both breathing heavily, both understanding the weight of what was coming. "Eunji," he said gently, "I'll give them the world if you let me." "They don't need the world," she whispered. "They need peace." He nodded, and for the first time since the headlines hit, she stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest. Not as a gesture of romance, but of surrender, of exhaustion, of the unbearable ache of being strong for too long. His arms went around her carefully, not claiming, just holding. "I won't let them hurt you again," he said into her hair. "You don't have that power," she murmured. "But thank you for wanting to try." Outside, the cameras circled, but inside, plans were quietly taking shape. A departure, a retreat, a hope for something untainted, not by silence, not by scandal. That was all that mattered. The first days were difficult. The children asked questions she couldn't answer. Why did the bakery close? Why were the neighbors gone? Why were they moving again? Eunji did her best. She told them it was an adventure, a break, a secret vacation. Minho stayed in the small guest room on the far end of the house, his presence careful, his steps lighter than the creaking floorboards. He helped without being asked, cooked simple meals, washed dishes, waited outside until invited in. Each evening, they all walked to the rocky shore and collected shells. Each night he went to sleep alone, until the night Hajun had a nightmare. The scream tore through the thin walls just after midnight. Eunji was up in seconds, rushing into the children's room to find her son trembling under his blanket, his face wet with sweat and tears. "They were yelling," he cried. "The cameras were back. They were chasing us again." She gathered him into her arms, whispering soothing words, brushing the hair from his forehead. "I want Tangyman," he whimpered. "Where is he?" Minsu and Jie stirred, watching with wide eyes. Eunji hesitated, and then she stood, still cradling Hajun, and opened the hallway door. Minho was already standing there. He didn't ask. He walked in and sat beside her on the floor, legs crossed, his hand gently resting on Hajun's back. "I'm here," he whispered. "It's okay. No one will hurt you. Not ever." The little boy curled into his arms without hesitation. That was the first night Minho didn't sleep in his own room. He stayed there on the floor between their beds until the children drifted back to sleep. And Eunji, sitting across the room, watched the shape of him in the darkness. Quiet, protective, broken, trying. The next morning, Jie asked if they could build a sandcastle. Minsu asked if Minho could come too. Hajun didn't let go of his hand the entire walk down the hill. It was slow, but it was happening. One night, after the children had fallen asleep under a blanket fort made of chairs and old quilts, Eunji stepped out onto the back porch where Minho was sitting with a cup of tea and a heavy look on his face. "They trust you," she said. His eyes met hers. "It terrifies me. They're smart. They don't give that trust away easily." "I don't deserve it," he said, his voice low. "Not yet." She leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the dark stretch of ocean. "You're doing something they've never seen before," she said quietly. "What's that?" "Consistency." He smiled faintly, then looked down into his cup. "I thought this place would give me peace, but it's just quiet. And in that quiet, all I hear is what I almost lost." She turned to him slowly. "You didn't lose them." "I almost did," he whispered. "And I keep thinking, what if this is temporary? What if one story, one photo, pulls them away from me again?" She stepped closer, folding her arms to her chest against the breeze. "Then fight," she said. "Not with press conferences, not with lawyers. Fight the quiet way, the way that matters. Be here. Stay." He looked up at her, eyes full of something he hadn't let show since soul vulnerability. "I'm scared of wanting this too much," he said. "Because what if one day you realize you're better without me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat beside him, their knees nearly touching. "I was better," she said softly, "but it was cold and hard and exhausting." She turned her face to him. "Now, I'm healing, not because of you, but because I'm not carrying everything alone anymore." His voice broke. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If one day they ask me to be their father, really be it, will you let me?" She closed her eyes for a moment, and then opened them, looking straight into his. "If they ask for you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I will never stand in the way." His breath caught. "Until then," she added, "you earn every smile, every laugh, every little hand that reaches for yours. You keep showing up." "I will," he whispered, and as they sat in silence again, the stars above them blinking faintly through the clouds, Eunji realized she wasn't waiting for him to be perfect anymore. She was just waiting for him to keep choosing them. Again. Ease. Which mostly involved running in circles until he collapsed with laughter. Minho didn't miss a moment. He was there for every scraped knee, every silly argument between the twins, every sleepy head that needed a story. He learned the shape of their needs like music, when Minsu needed silence, when Jia needed praise, when Hajun needed arms wrapped tightly around him without question. And Eunji watched. She watched as the lines between him and them blurred so naturally. It frightened her. Not because she didn't want it, but because she did. And one afternoon, as spring fully bloomed around the little house, Minsu tugged at her sleeve while she was folding laundry. "Mom," he asked softly. "What do I call him?" She froze, the shirt slipping from her hands. Minsu looked up with his calm, clear eyes, so much like his father's, and waited. Eunji swallowed. "What do you want to call him?" The little boy hesitated, then whispered, "He feels like a papa, but I don't know if I'm allowed." Her heart ached. She bent down to his level, brushing his hair back gently. "You are allowed. You always were. But you don't have to decide today. Just when you're ready." Minsu nodded, thoughtful, and ran back outside. That night, she sat on the edge of Minho's bed in the small guest room. He looked up from the notebook in his hands, surprised. "I didn't think you'd still be awake. I wanted to talk to you," she said. He set the notebook aside. "Is everything all right? Minsu asked me something today." Minho straightened. "Is he okay?" She nodded slowly. "He asked what he should call you." Minho's breath caught. "He did. I didn't tell him what to say. I just told him he could choose." His eyes filled. "What did he decide?" "Nothing yet," she said, voice soft. "But Minho, I need you to be ready. For when they do choose you. For when the weight of that word, father, lands in your hands." "I will be," he said, voice rough. "I've been waiting my whole life to hear it from them." She looked at him for a long moment. "And if they never do? If it takes years? Or if it never comes?" "I'll still be here," he whispered. "Because I'm not here for the title. I'm here for them." She reached for the notebook he had set down. "What are you writing?" He hesitated. "Letters. One for each of them. For when they're older. I want them to know how I saw them now. Before I forgot the little things." She opened one gently. It was addressed to Jia, on the day she danced in the rain. Her throat tightened as she read the first lines. "You twirled with your eyes closed, arms wide, like the sky belonged to you. I don't know how to tell you how proud I was, so I'll write it instead." She handed it back carefully, eyes shining. "You're doing more than I ever asked." Minho met her gaze. "You gave me the chance." She stood then, turning toward the door. But before she left, she paused, her hand on the frame. "If they ask you tomorrow, what will you say?" He didn't need to ask what she meant. He stood slowly, walked over, and stopped just behind her. "I'll say I'm honored," he murmured, "and that I'll never stop earning it." She turned slightly, her eyes searching his. "And if I asked?" He blinked. "You? If I asked you," she said, voice trembling now, "to stop trying to be perfect, to just be here, to just be the man who stayed. Would you?" He stepped closer, his voice low, aching. "I'm not going anywhere, Eunji." She looked down, her fingers curled against the doorframe. "I'm scared." "So am I," he whispered. "But I'd rather be scared beside you than safe without you." Her eyes met his, and in that moment, something between them shifted, quietly, without fireworks or music. Just truth settling into place like a stone finally sinking to the bottom of a deep, still lake. She stepped out of the room without saying more. But as she closed the door gently behind her, her heartbeat echoed like a whisper in her. Minho sat alone on the back porch, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. The children had gone to bed early after a long day exploring the tide pools. Eunji had tucked them in with a bedtime story, but she hadn't come outside yet. He could still hear Jae's voice, whispering before sleep claimed her. "Can I call him Appa now?" The word had landed in his chest like thunder. He didn't answer her, he hadn't known how. He just kissed her forehead and tucked her blanket up to her chin. Now the porch door creaked open. Eunji stepped out quietly, arms crossed, a cardigan draped around her shoulders. Her face was unreadable, calm but not distant. Minho stood, unsure if he should speak. She walked to the railing and looked out toward the horizon. The waves rolled in slowly, like they too were listening. "They're asleep," she said softly. He nodded. "They were amazing today." "They always are," she murmured. "But today?" "They asked questions I wasn't ready for." She turned to him, her eyes full of something heavy. "Min-ho, they want you." He swallowed. "I want them too." "No, not like before. Not just as the man who comes to visit. Not just as someone who brings gifts or listens to stories." She took a step closer. "They want a father." His breath caught. "I asked you," she said quietly, "what you'd do if they said it, if they asked for you." He nodded. "And I told you I'd be honored." Her voice cracked. "Then tell them." He blinked. "Now?" "Tomorrow," she said. "But it has to be you. I can't do it for you anymore. They've waited long enough. And so have you." His voice trembled. "What if I mess it up?" "You will," she said, a small, broken smile on her lips. "Because you're human. But if you show them who you are, the way you've shown me, they'll love you. Fully. Fiercely." Min-ho sat down again, slowly, as if her words had taken the strength from his knees. She sat beside him. For a long time, they just breathed in silence. Then he whispered, "I don't think I ever really knew what it meant to be someone's son. My mother, she taught me how to climb ladders, not how to hold someone's hand." Unji's gaze softened. "Then maybe this is your chance to learn it through them." He looked down at his hands. "What if they see the cracks?" he asked. "What if one day they're old enough to understand what I did to you? What I didn't do?" "They will see the cracks," she said, not flinching. "And they'll love you anyway. Not because you were perfect, but because you stayed. Because you chose them every day after." He blinked fast, trying to keep the tears down. "And what about you?" he asked. "What about me?" He turned toward her fully now, voice low, raw. "Do you see the cracks, Unji? Can you love me with them?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she reached across the space between them and took his hand. "I never stopped loving the man I married," she said. "I just stopped recognizing him." He closed his eyes, breathing shakily. "But lately," she whispered, "I see pieces of him again, in the way you tie Jas shoes, in the way you let Minsu lead, in the way you carry Hajun when he's too tired to pretend he's flying." She paused. "I'm not ready to say yes to everything again, but I'm no longer saying no." His eyes opened. "Then what are we?" She smiled faintly. "We're rebuilding." He nodded as if that was more than enough. And it was. The stars above them blinked to life, quiet and still. Then, from inside the cottage, the tiniest voice called out, "Appa?" Minho's heart stilled. It was Jie. He stood up so fast the chair nearly tipped. Unji touched his arm. "Go." He stepped inside, his breath shaking. In the dim hallway, Jie stood with her blanket clutched to her chest. "I had a dream," she whispered, "and you were gone." He knelt in front of her, eyes full of emotion. "I'm not going anywhere, Jie. I promise." She looked at him for a long time, then reached out, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered, "Good night, Appa." He broke, not with sound, not with movement, just quietly, completely. His arms wrapping around her, his heart anchoring itself to the sound of her voice. Unji stood in the doorway and watched. Minho stared at that drawing for hours. He kept it folded in his shirt pocket like a talisman. The house felt different now. Not quieter, but warmer. More grounded. The kind of warmth that doesn't announce itself. Just wraps around you like a familiar song. And still, Unji hadn't said anything more. She watched. She listened. She smiled softly when the children ran into Minho's arms. But she held something back. And he felt it. So one night, after the kids were asleep, Minho stepped into the kitchen where she stood drying dishes, the light above her humming gently. Her shoulders were tense. The silence between them had stretched too long. "I need to ask you something," he said. She didn't turn around. "What is it?" He hesitated, then stepped closer. "Are you waiting for me to leave?" Her hands stilled. The cloth slipped from her fingers and landed in the sink. She turned to face him. "What did you say?" "I mean," his voice faltered, "you've let me be here. You've given me so much. But you haven't said what you want. About me. About this. Sometimes I wonder if you're just waiting for this to fall apart again." She looked at him, pain flickering in her eyes. "You think I'm expecting you to fail? I don't blame you if you are," he said. "I failed before. I broke us. And now, I'm here holding things with hands that used to let go. If I'm going to stay, I need to know you want me to." She stared at him, her voice a whisper. "Do you really not know?" Minho said nothing. He looked at her, searching, vulnerable. "I wake up every day and watch you with them," she said slowly. "I see the way you tie GS hair like you're trying to memorize the steps. I see how you let Hajun fly even when he nearly breaks a lamp. I see how you give Minsu space. Not because you're distant, but because you've learned how to love him." Her voice began to shake. "I watch it all and I feel like I'm falling into something terrifying, because I want you here, and that terrifies me more than anything." "Why?" he asked gently. "Because if I let myself believe it, if I open that door again," her eyes filled, her throat tightening, "and you walk away, this time it won't just break me. It'll break them, and I won't survive that." Minho stepped forward, tears burning behind his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, Unji. You said that once," she said, voice cracking. "I was a coward once," he said, "but I'm not him anymore." She looked at him, eyes full of battle scars and the ache of still healing wounds. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then let me show you," he said. "Every day, as long as it takes." He reached out, slowly, waiting, and this time she didn't pull away. Her hand found his, their fingers laced together, tentative but steady. She stepped into his arms, and he held her as if she were the only thing tethering him to the world. They stood like that for a long time, silent, breathing, breaking open together. And then, in the quiet, she whispered into his chest, "I don't want to do this alone anymore." "You won't," he promised. Not just a vow, a decision, a truth. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, but inside, something had finally settled. Minho stirred in the quiet of the living room, cradling a half-asleep Hajun on his chest. They had fallen asleep there after an impromptu late-night story session about flying dragons and fearless foxes. The boy's tiny hand was curled around the collar of his shirt, his breathing soft and even. Unji stepped in, barefoot, holding 2 mugs of tea. She paused at the doorway, her heart catching at the sight of them. Minho asleep with one of their children, like he belonged there all along. She placed the mugs down gently and crouched beside him. "He didn't want to sleep alone," she whispered. Minho opened his eyes slowly. "He kept asking if dragons get tired. I said yes. He said he wasn't one, so he didn't have to sleep." Unji smiled. "Sounds about right." He sat up gently, carrying Hajun to the sofa and laying him down with careful hands. Unji watched the movement, her heart aching in that quiet way that only comes when the past and present overlap too deeply. "Minho," she began, but her voice caught. She cleared her throat. "There's something I need to ask you." He turned, instantly serious. "Anything. It's not a favor," she said. "It's a truth I need to hear out loud." He stepped closer, eyes on her. "Go on. If they ever ask what happened between us, what will you say?" He didn't respond right away. His gaze dropped, his jaw tightening as if the weight of that question pressed on the very air between them. "I'll tell them," he said finally, "that I failed you." Her eyes flickered, waiting. "I'll tell them I let fear win," he continued. "That I was too small to hold something as big as the love you gave me. That I left you standing in the rain when I should have pulled you into my arms." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I'll tell them you were strong when I was weak. That you built a world for them when I walked away from it." He stepped closer now, voice trembling. "And I'll tell them that coming back wasn't about guilt or regret. It was about finally becoming the man you believed I could be." She covered her mouth, trying not to break. "I want them to know the truth," he said, softer now. "Not to shame me, but to understand that love isn't always perfect. That it's not about never falling. It's about who stays after the fall." Unji lowered her hand. "And what if they hate you for it?" He looked at her, eyes full of ache and resolution. "Then I'll accept it, and I'll keep loving them anyway." A tear rolled down her cheek. She stepped forward and rested her forehead gently against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her with quiet desperation, as though holding her now could somehow protect everything that had already happened. "I used to dream of you apologizing," she whispered. "In every version of that dream, it made me feel powerful, like I'd won. And now?" he asked. She shook her head slightly. "Now it just makes me feel tired, but also seen and safe." They stood there for a long moment, hearts pressed close, words fading into silence. Then she pulled back slightly and said, "Come with me." He followed her without question. They walked into the children's room together. Jie and Minsu were still asleep. The window was slightly open, letting in the scent of ocean air. Unji reached into the top drawer of the wardrobe and pulled out a worn envelope, thick with time. She handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "The first letter I ever wrote to you after you left," she said. "The one I never sent." He opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside, her handwriting, small, uneven, filled with emotion. "You won't hear their first cry, but I hope someday, when you're ready, you'll hear their laughter. And maybe then you'll come home." His eyes blurred with tears. "I never stopped waiting," she whispered, "even when I convinced myself I had." He folded the letter and placed it gently against his chest. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I did," she said, "more than once. But somehow, even in that, I still hoped." A knock came at the door. They both turned. Minsu stood there, holding a